I did not scream. I did not walk off the stage. I did not give him the satisfaction of a single visible crack in the armor I had spent 38 years forging. My name is Claire St. James, and I had spent 14 years building a career that existed entirely outside the walls of my family's estimation. 2,743 claims, reviewed with 0 appeals upheld against my judgment. 3 industry awards for actuarial excellence. A certification in forensic accounting that required 18 months of night classes, while I was still the one who handled my mother's prescription pickups, and my sister's emergency school fees, and my father's quarterly tax filings. I stood on that stage in a gown I had bought from a department store rack, altered myself, and pressed with a borrowed iron, and I watched Derek Holloway adjust the microphone with the casual contempt of a man who had never once opened a single file I had closed. The banquet hall at the Marriott downtown held 247 people. I had counted the chairs during the salad course. Insurance industry award ceremonies are not glamorous affairs. They are beige. Beige tablecloths, beige chicken, beige applause from people who are already calculating how quickly they can leave. But this was the 3rd consecutive year my division had won the Excellence in Claims Accuracy Award, and Derek Holloway, my supervisor, had been asked to present it, because he was technically the department head, even though he had not personally reviewed a single claim in the 7 years since his promotion. And now, he said, holding up the crystal plaque as if it were a prop he had been handed by a stage manager, our very own Claire St. James receives yet another recognition from the National Association of Insurance Auditors, which I believe some might call, and I quote, participation trophy nonsense. 247 people. Some laughed, some shifted in their seats. The senior vice president at the front table did not laugh, but he did not stop it either. I did not flinch. I did not drop my gaze. I simply registered the slight, almost imperceptible tremor in Derek's left hand as he set the plaque down on the lectern, and I noted the way his eyes flickered to the senior vice president for approval that did not come. The man had a tell. Every man has a tell. Derek Holloway's tell was that he checked for permission before he committed to cruelty, which meant he was not bold. He was cowardly. And cowardly men were the easiest to read, the easiest to predict, and as I would learn 6 months later, the easiest to undo. I walked to the stage. I took the plaque. I said thank you to the association. I did not look at Derek. I did not look at the laughing tables. I looked at the back of the room where Marcus Webb stood leaning against the service door, arms crossed, watching me with the quiet, unreadable expression he had worn since the day I hired him. Marcus was my assistant. That was what everyone called him. My assistant, the man who filed things, the man who brought coffee. That was the story my family told themselves about Marcus, because it fit neatly into the larger narrative they had constructed about me, that I was surrounded by people of equally modest station, that my life was small and manageable, and therefore dismissible. What they did not know, what they never thought to ask, was that Marcus Webb held a master's degree in forensic accounting from the same university where my grandmother had taught literature for 32 years. What they did not know was that Marcus had worked for the Department of Justice for 6 years before he walked away from government pay scales and came to work for me. What they did not know was that Marcus could read a financial statement the way my grandmother used to read a poem, finding the hidden meaning in the spaces between the numbers, locating the irregularity in the rhythm of the decimal points. If you have ever sat in a room where your own blood treated you like an inconvenient stranger, tell me what city you're listening from. I want to know where the quiet women are standing watch tonight, because I know you are out there. I know you are the ones who hold the family together and receive no credit. I know you are the ones who remember every birthday and never have your own remembered. I know you are the ones who show up to every holiday with a dish you prepared yourself and leave with the leftovers you brought because no one thought to plate anything for you. I know you, I am you. And I want you to hear what happened when one of us finally stopped holding the structure upright and simply, quietly, stepped aside. Now, let me take you back to how this nightmare started. It started long before Derek Holloway opened his mouth on that stage. It started in a Victorian house on Maple Street in a small Connecticut town, where the leaves turned gold in October, and the windows frosted in December, and my grandmother Evelyn St. James sat in a leather armchair by the fire, writing in a ledger book with a fountain pen that had belonged to her father. That house was the only place I had ever been loved without condition. That house was the only place I had ever been seen, And when my grandmother died, the house went to my mother, Eleanor Vance, and everything else about my life became a negotiation. I was 29 when my grandmother passed. I had been working at the insurance company for 3 years, living in a one-bedroom apartment with a radiator that clanked and a window that did not fully seal. I was the one who found the will, folded in her desk drawer beneath a stack of unused birthday cards. I was the one who read it aloud to my mother and father and sister in the lawyer's office. I was the one who did not flinch when the lawyer explained that my grandmother had set aside a small trust for me, separate from the main estate, with instructions that it be used for my continued education. Claire always had her nose in a book, my mother said afterward in the parking lot, pulling her coat tight against the November wind. It's merely that your grandmother never understood how the real world works. You cannot study your way out of obscurity, Claire. My mother's verbal tic was the word merely explained away everything. A cruelty was merely a joke. An exclusion was merely an oversight. A life's work was merely a hobby. She wielded merely like a scalpel, excising the weight from every wound she inflicted, leaving the injury intact but rendered invisible by language. Merely. I had been trained to accept merely my entire life. My father, Harold St. James, stood beside the car with his hands in his pockets, looking at the ground. His verbal tic was the absence of a tic. He said nothing. He agreed with everything. He disagreed with nothing. He was a ghost who walked through rooms leaving no mark, a man who had long ago decided that neutrality was the same as peace. It was not. Neutrality was just silence, and silence was just another form of permission. My sister, Melanie St. James Carson, stood with her phone in her hand, showing me pictures of her children. For the kids, she said, which was her verbal tic. Everything was for the kids. The vacation she could not afford was for the kids. The new car she bought while I was still driving a 10-year-old sedan was for the kids. The money she asked my mother for, the money she asked me for, the money that never appeared in any ledger she kept, it was all for the kids. This was her get-out-of-jail-free card, the phrase that ended every argument before it began, because who could argue with the children? I did not mention the trust. I did not mention that my grandmother had left me a specific amount, $12,000, earmarked for certification programs and professional development. I did not mention it because I knew, even then, that mentioning it would be the same as losing it. My mother would say the money should be pooled for the family. My sister would say the children needed new coats. My father would say nothing and nod. So I said nothing, and I quietly enrolled in the forensic accounting certification program, and I paid for it myself with the money from the trust, and I never told a single one of them. The forensic objects came to me in the months after my grandmother's death. The first was the fountain pen. It arrived in a box wrapped in brown paper, mailed to my apartment with no return address, but I knew my grandmother's handwriting on the label. Inside was a Mont Blanc Meisterstück fountain pen, black resin with a gold nib, the same pen she had used to write in her ledger every night. A note was tucked beneath it, for the words you have not yet written. I looked up the value later, $1,275. I kept it in my desk drawer at work, never used it, never showed it to anyone. It was my grandmother's totem, the object that held her belief in me, and I treated it like a relic. The second was the brooch. My grandmother had owned a silver brooch with a small emerald at its center, a gift from her father on her wedding day. At her funeral, my mother wore it pinned to her collar. I noticed immediately. I said nothing. I also noticed that one of the small diamonds surrounding the emerald was missing. It was a detail only someone who had studied the brooch for years would catch. I had studied it for years. Every time my grandmother held me on her lap, I had traced my finger over the emerald, over the diamonds, over the intricate silver filigree. I knew the number of diamonds, 14. On my mother's collar there were 13. I said nothing, but I noted it. The third was the ledger itself. My grandmother's leather-bound account book, the one she had kept for 40 years, recording every penny that moved through the St. James household. After her death, I found it in the library, slipped between 2 volumes of poetry. I took it. I did not ask permission. I tucked it into my bag and walked out of the house, and I did not feel a single pang of guilt. The ledger was mine because I was the only one who would read it. And over the next several weeks, I did read it. Every night, after work, after dinner, after the phone calls from my mother that I answered out of obligation, I sat at my small kitchen table, and I read my grandmother's handwriting, and I learned things I had not known. I learned that my grandmother had been quietly paying for my sister's private school tuition for years, a fact my mother had claimed was covered by scholarships. I learned that my grandmother had made a series of small loans to my father, each one meticulously recorded with a repayment date that never arrived. I learned that the trust she left for me was not an afterthought. It was exactly 1/5 of the liquid assets she had at the time of her death. 1/5 for me. 1/5 for each of her other grandchildren, my sister's children, who were 8 and 5 when she died. The remaining 3/5 went to my mother. But the ledger showed that in the 2 years before her death, my mother had asked for and received approximately $27,000 in what my grandmother had labeled advances against inheritance. The total of my sister's advances, for the kids, came to 14,000. My father had borrowed 6. I did the math. I closed the ledger. I put it in the bottom drawer of my desk beneath a stack of tax returns, and I began to understand the shape of what I was dealing with. The family was not wealthy. They were bleeding. They had been bleeding for years, and my grandmother had been the tourniquet, and now she was gone and the bleeding had not stopped. It had simply found new sources. The night after I read the ledger for the first time, I went to dinner at my mother's house. The Victorian, my grandmother's house, now my mother's house. The dining room table was the same mahogany. The chandelier was the same crystal. The china was the same pattern my grandmother had chosen in 1978. But the energy was different. My mother sat at the head of the table, my father at the foot, my sister across from me. The children were upstairs with a babysitter. The conversation was the same conversation we had been having for 7 years. My sister's financial struggles, my mother's health concerns, my father's silence, my role as the witness. "Claire," my mother said, setting down her fork, "I need you to look into the insurance situation. Your father's policy is being difficult." "I work in claims auditing," I said. "I do not sell policies." "Merely, you know what I mean, you understand the language. Just look at the paperwork and tell me if we are being overcharged." I looked at my father, who was cutting his green beans into uniform pieces. He did not look up. "Send me the documents," I said. "I will take a look." "You are such a help, Claire," my mother said, and the way she said it made help sound like a burden she was reluctantly grateful for. "I do not know what we would do without you. You are the organized one, the responsible one, always have been." Melanie smiled at me across the table. "For the kids, Claire, could you also look into their dental coverage? I think we are being overbilled." I said yes. I always said yes. I was the responsible one, the organized one, the one who handled things, the one who received no credit, no thanks, no reciprocity, the one who was dismissed, exploited, and resented in equal measure, the one who was standing on a stage 6 years later, holding a crystal plaque, listening to her supervisor call her achievement participation trophy nonsense, while her family sat at home and did not even know she had been awarded it. The fracture came on a Thursday. I was at my desk at Midwest Insurance Group, a cubicle farm in a building that smelled like burnt coffee and recycled air. I had been in claims auditing for 11 years at that point. I had seen the worst of what people could do to each other in the name of money. I had reviewed fraudulent medical claims, inflated repair estimates, staged accident reports. I had developed an instinct for the irregular, a kind of sixth sense that told me when a number did not belong where it was sitting. That Thursday, I received an email from my mother's personal account. She did not send emails often. She preferred phone calls because phone calls could not be documented. But this was a forwarded message, sent from my father's work email to my mother's personal account, and my mother had forwarded it to me with the subject line, "Fix this." I opened it, I read it. I did not scream. I did not cry. I set my coffee cup down on the coaster Marcus had bought me for my birthday, and I noticed the slight, almost imperceptible tremor in my own hands, and I observed it clinically, the way I observed every irregular datum. The email was from my father's accountant. It was a summary of the family trust, the one my grandmother had established, the one I had assumed was closed after her death. It was not closed. It was still active. And according to the accountant's summary, assets worth approximately $68,000 had been withdrawn from the trust in the 3 years since my grandmother's death. The withdrawals were not evenly distributed. My mother had taken 30. My sister had taken 24. My father had taken 12. I had taken exactly 0, because I had not known the trust still existed. But that was not the part that made me set down my coffee. The part that made me set down my coffee was the date of the most recent withdrawal. It had occurred 8 days earlier. The amount was $6,000. The payee listed was Derek Holloway. I read it 3 times. Derek Holloway, my supervisor, the man who had presented my award, The man who had called it participation trophy nonsense. The man who had, 8 days before that award ceremony, received a payment of $6,000 from my grandmother's trust. I closed the email. I did not reply. I did not forward it to anyone. I opened my desk drawer and I looked at my grandmother's fountain pen, the Mont Blanc Meisterstück, valued at $1,275, a fraction of what had been taken from the trust, a fraction of what had been paid to the man who humiliated me on a stage. I picked up the pen. I ran my finger over the gold nib, and I made a decision. I opened a new document. I named it SD, James Trust Documentation Trail. I copied the email. I copied the accountant's summary. I began a log, date, source, amount, payee. I did not know what I would do with it. I did not know how the strands would connect. But I knew with the cold certainty of a woman who had spent 14 years auditing the claims of people who had lied, cheated, and manipulated that the pattern was there. I just had to read it the way my grandmother had read her ledger. Slowly, carefully, without prejudice. I worked late that night. The office emptied around me. The fluorescent lights hummed above my head. The computer screen reflected my face back at me, a woman in a navy blazer and a white button-down, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, eyes that had seen too much and forgiven too often. I found the payment trail. It took me 3 hours, but I found it. The $6,000 had been routed through 3 accounts before it reached Derek Holloway's name. The originating account was the trust. The intermediary was a shell company registered in my sister's name. Final destination was a consulting fee paid to Holloway Consulting Services, which was registered to Derek Holloway's wife. I copied everything. I saved everything. I locked my desk. And then I sat back in my chair, and I thought about the missing emerald on my mother's brooch, and I thought about the $1,275 pen in my drawer, and I thought about the ledger in my kitchen, and I thought about the $68,000 that had been taken from a trust I had not known existed. I did not know what I was going to do yet, but I knew what I was not going to do. I was not going to fix this. I was going to document it. I was going to let it breathe. And I was going to wait for the exact moment when the information I had collected would carry more weight than any favor I had ever done, any bill I had ever paid, any silence I had ever kept. I put my grandmother's pen back in the drawer. I turned off my computer. I walked through the empty office to the elevator, and I rode down to the parking garage, and I sat in my car for a long time before I started the engine. The trust was still active. The payments were still flowing. And Derek Holloway had no idea that the woman whose career he had mocked was the same woman who would soon hold every single thread of his financial life in her hands. I started the car. I drove home. And the next morning, I went back to my desk, and I opened the file again, and I began to build the case that would, 6 months later, land in my lap with the weight of an emergency surgery authorization and the signature of a man who had no idea I had been watching him for months. That was the first fracture. And it was only where I began. I arrived at the Marriott downtown at 6:15 in the evening, 22 minutes before the cocktail hour. The lobby was already thick with the particular energy of an industry banquet. Men in suits that cost more than my monthly rent, women in gowns that had never seen a department store clearance rack, the hum of professional egos polishing themselves against each other. I walked through the revolving door and did not stop to admire the chandelier. I knew where I was going. I had studied the floor plan that morning. Room 203, the Crystal Ballroom. I had already read the menu, the seating chart, the speaking order. I was not here to be impressed. I was here to be seen, and then to be dismissed, which was the part of the evening I had trained for my entire life. The Crystal Ballroom was a cavernous space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, draped in ivory and gold, lit by chandeliers that scattered light across 247 place settings. I counted them again as I entered. 247. I was seated at table 12, near the back, not the front. Table 1 held the senior vice president and the board members. Table 2 held the regional directors. Table 12 held the people who were important enough to invite but not important enough to be seen. I was the only woman at my table who had not come with a husband or a date. I was the only one who had driven herself. My gown was navy blue, floor-length, with a modest neckline and short sleeves. I had bought it at a department store for $129, and I had altered the hem myself using the sewing machine my grandmother had left me. It was not designer. It was not silk. But it fit perfectly, and the color matched the brooch I had pinned to my left shoulder. A silver piece with a small emerald at its center, a replica I had commissioned from a jeweler, after I noticed the missing diamond on my mother's brooch. The original was long gone, given to me by my grandmother when I turned 18, but I had lost it somewhere in the chaos of my mother's house. I had never told anyone. I had simply replaced it with a near-perfect copy, and I wore it tonight because my grandmother had believed in me, and I needed to feel her belief pressed against my collarbone. My mother arrived at 6:37. I watched her sweep through the ballroom doors in a gown of deep burgundy silk, the original brooch pinned to her collar, the missing diamond still absent. She had not noticed. Of course she had not noticed. She did not look at her jewelry with the same attention she looked at other people's failures. Behind her walked my father, Harold St. James, in a suit that had been pressed but not updated, the cuffs slightly frayed, the tie a shade too dark. He followed at a distance of 3 feet, the exact distance he had maintained in every public setting for 34 years of marriage. Behind them came my sister Melanie, in a champagne-colored cocktail dress that was too short for the occasion and too tight for her frame, her heels clicking against the marble floor with the confidence of someone who had never once had to account for her spending. "Claire," my mother said, arriving at my table with the air of a woman granting an audience. "You look nice. Merely the Navy is a bit severe for an awards ceremony. You could have borrowed something from me." The words were delivered with a smile. The smile was a weapon. I had learned to read it the way I read financial statements. Look for the irregularity hidden in the pattern. The irregularity here was the word merely, which preceded every criticism and absolved the speaker of any malice. Merely constructive, merely a suggestion, merely the truth delivered in a tone that made the truth feel like an insult. "The Navy is fine, Mother," I said. I did not stand. I did not invite her to sit. I simply held my ground. Melanie leaned down to kiss my cheek, leaving a smear of lip gloss I did not wipe away. "For the kids, Claire, you should have let me help you choose something. I could have loaned you my red dress. It would have been stunning on you." I did not point out that she had never loaned me anything in her life. I did not point out that the red dress she was referring to was one I had helped her pay for when her credit card was declined at the register. I simply smiled and said, "Thank you, Melanie." My father said nothing. He sat in the chair beside me and adjusted his tie. That was his contribution. He was present, which was enough for him, and he expected it to be enough for everyone else. The cocktail hour passed in a blur of small talk and lukewarm hors d'oeuvres. I ate nothing. I watched. I observed the way my mother worked the room, touching elbows, laughing at jokes that were not funny, positioning herself within earshot of the regional directors. She had not come to support me. She had come to network. That was the family way. Every event was an opportunity, every relationship a transaction, every success a stepping stone for someone else. At 7:15, the lights dimmed and the program began. The senior vice president gave a speech about industry standards. The regional director gave a speech about teamwork. A string quartet played something classical and forgettable. And then the vice president of claims operations took the stage, adjusted the microphone, and announced that the Excellence in Claims Accuracy Award for the Northeast Division would be presented by none other than Derek Holloway. I had known he was presenting. I had seen the speaking schedule, but knowing and experiencing are two different things, and the gap between them is measured in heartbeats. Derek Holloway walked to the podium in a charcoal suit that cost more than my car. He was a tall man with a confident stride and the kind of smile that had opened doors for him his entire life. He tapped the microphone once, twice, and then he leaned into it with the casual ease of a man who had never been interrupted, never been questioned, never been held accountable. "Good evening, everyone," he said. "I am Derek Holloway, Senior Supervisor of Claims Auditing for the Regional Division, and it is my privilege to present this year's Excellence in Claims Accuracy Award." The room applauded. I did not applaud, I watched. "The recipient of this award," he continued, holding up the crystal plaque, "has demonstrated exceptional performance in claims auditing over the past fiscal year. Specifically, a 97.3% accuracy rate on over 2,000 claims reviewed. I am told that is a record for the division." He paused. He looked at the card in his hand. And then he looked up at the audience with the expression of a man who had just decided to say something he thought was clever. "Now I have to be honest with you," he said, and the room quieted because a speaker who says "I have to be honest" is always about to say something dishonest. "I have been told that this award is given every year and that the same person has won it 3 years running, which some might call, and I quote, participation trophy nonsense." The laughter started at table 1, cascaded through tables 2 through 5, and rippled across the room like a wave of relief. People laughed because they wanted to laugh. They laughed because Derek Holloway was a superior, and laughing at his joke was a form of compliance. They laughed because they did not know me, did not care about me, did not need to consider the weight of a woman standing alone at the back of the room. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not walk off the stage because I was not on the stage. I was at table 12 and I was sitting perfectly still, and I was looking at the slight, almost imperceptible tremor in the fingers of Derek Holloway's left hand as he held the plaque. The man was nervous. He had prepared this joke. He had rehearsed it. He had thought it would land well, and it had, but he had also checked the room before he said it, and that check was the tell I had noted 6 months earlier in a quarterly review meeting. Derek Holloway checked for permission before he committed. And tonight, the senior vice president had given him permission with a slight, almost imperceptible nod. I set my hands flat on the tablecloth. I felt the cool linen beneath my palms. I took a breath in, held it, released it. I counted to 3. And then I stood, walked to the front of the room, and accepted the plaque from Derek Holloway's trembling hand. "Thank you," I said. I did not say his name. I did not look at him. I looked at the room, at 247 people who had just laughed at me, and I did not give a single one of them the satisfaction of a crack. The applause that followed was polite, rapid, and mercenary. It was the sound of people who wanted to move on to dinner. I returned to my seat. My mother was not looking at me. She was looking at the senior vice president, calculating. My sister was on her phone, scrolling. My father was cutting a roll in half, slowly, precisely, the same way he cut his green beans on any given Thursday. And I sat in my chair, the plaque on the table in front of me, and I thought about the $6,000 that had moved from my grandmother's trust to Derek Holloway's consulting company 8 days before this ceremony. I thought about the shell company registered in my sister's name. I thought about the 3 accounts that had laundered the money. I thought about the documentation trail I had built, the file I had named SD. James Trust Documentation Trail, which now contained 32 pages of evidence. And they thought that was the ending. They thought the joke was the final word. They thought the laughter was the closing scene. They thought I would sit there, humiliated, and then go back to my cubicle and continue processing claims, and being helpful and saying yes and fixing things, and asking for nothing in return. They did not know that I had already sent an encrypted email to Patricia O'Connell, forensic accountant and former colleague, at 7:42 that evening. They did not know that Patricia had replied at 7:58 with a single word. Received. They did not know that the documentation trail was already being reviewed by the legal department of the National Association of Insurance Auditors, which had a whistleblower hotline that I had used at 8:03, after the salad course. They did not know that Derek Holloway's joke was not the punchline. It was the opening move. It was the moment I had been waiting for, because now I had a public humiliation tied to a private fraud. I had a motive. I had a timeline. I had a pattern of behavior that extended from my family's kitchen table to the boardroom of a Fortune 500 insurance company. I sat through the main course. I sat through the keynote speech. I sat through the dessert course, which was a chocolate mousse I did not touch. And when the program ended and the room began to empty, I stood, picked up my plaque, and walked toward the exit without looking back. "Claire," my mother called from behind me. "Claire, wait." I stopped, I turned. She was standing with my father and my sister, the 3 of them arranged in a formation I had seen 1,000 times. My mother in the center, arms crossed. My father slightly behind, hands in pockets. My sister slightly to the side, phone in hand. "We are going to the lounge for drinks," my mother said. "There are some people I need to speak with. You should come. It would be good for your career." I looked at her. I looked at the brooch on her collar, the missing diamond, the thing she had not noticed because she had never looked closely at anything I had given her. "I cannot," I said. "I have work." "On a Friday night? Merely, you work too hard. You always have. It is unbecoming." "It is what pays my bills, mother." She waved her hand, a dismissal. "Suit yourself. We will be at the bar. Come if you change your mind." She did not wait for my answer. She turned and walked toward the lounge, my father and sister trailing behind her like satellites caught in a decaying orbit. I watched them go. I watched the backs of their heads, the familiar angles of their shoulders, the way they moved through the world as if they were the only people in it. And then I went to the parking garage, got in my car, and drove to the address Patricia O'Connell had sent me. Patricia's office was a converted brownstone in the historic district, 3 floors of exposed brick and industrial lighting that she had financed with the settlement from a class action lawsuit she had won against a pharmaceutical company. She was waiting for me on the second floor, a cup of tea in her hand, a laptop open on her desk. "You look like someone who just survived a funeral," she said as I walked in. "Close," I said. "An awards ceremony." I sat down across from her. I pulled the plaque out of my bag and set it on her desk. She looked at it, looked at me, and raised an eyebrow. "Is that what I think it is? It is the reason I need your help." I opened my laptop. I pulled up the documentation trail. I expanded the timeline, the amounts, the shell company, the payment to Derek Holloway. I laid it out for her the way I had laid it out for myself, clean, precise, undeniable. Patricia read in silence for 4 minutes. She was a woman in her early 60s, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, the kind of professional who had seen every form of financial manipulation and had learned to recognize the patterns before the perpetrators did. "This is a fraud," she said finally, not a question. "Yes, this trust was supposed to be closed. Yes, and your sister set up a shell company to funnel money to your supervisor. Yes, do you know why? Not yet. But I know the payment was made 8 days before the awards ceremony. And I know that Derek Holloway recommended me for a promotion 3 years ago that was never finalized. And I know that my mother has been taking advances against assets she does not have the authority to take." Patricia leaned back in her chair. She tapped her finger against her laptop. "This is not just a family matter, Claire. This is wire fraud. This is potential embezzlement. If the trust was established with a formal legal structure, and your mother is not the sole trustee, then every withdrawal without the consent of the other beneficiaries is unauthorized." "There is only one other beneficiary," I said, "me, and I did not consent." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "What do you want to do with this?" I had been thinking about that question for 6 months. I had been carrying the documentation trail like a stone in my pocket, turning it over, feeling its weight. I knew what I wanted, but I wanted to be careful. I wanted to be precise. I wanted to be certain. "Want to let it breathe," I said. "I want to wait until the next time a payment is made, and then I want to freeze the trust, file a formal complaint with the insurance board, and let the natural consequences land where they will." "Natural consequences," Patricia repeated. "That is a kind way to say destruction." I did not smile. "I am not trying to destroy anyone. I am trying to stop being the one who holds everything up while everyone else dances on the rubble." Patricia nodded. She closed her laptop. "I will draft a letter of demand to the bank that holds the trust. I will also prepare a formal complaint to the insurance board regarding Derek Holloway's conflict of interest. I will not file anything until you give me the go-ahead, but I want it ready." "Thank you. Do you want to know what the approximate value of the trust is currently?" "Yes. After the withdrawals, approximately $112,000 remain. The bulk of it is in a low-yield savings account. Your grandmother structured it to preserve capital, not to generate income." $112,000. I thought about the $6,000 that had gone to Derek Holloway. I thought about the $24,000 my sister had taken. I thought about the $30,000 my mother had taken. I thought about the $1,275 fountain pen in my desk drawer, the one my grandmother had given me, the one I had never used because I was waiting for the right words to write. "I will wait for your draft," I said. Patricia stood. She walked me to the door. "Claire," she said, "you are doing the right thing. I am doing the necessary thing. The necessary thing and the right thing are often the same, they just feel different." I drove home through the empty streets, my headlights cutting through the dark, the plaque on the passenger seat beside me. I did not turn on the radio. I did not call anyone. I simply drove and I thought and I planned. When I arrived at my apartment, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. I took out my grandmother's ledger. I took out her fountain pen. And I opened the ledger to the last page she had written on, the page where her handwriting stopped, the page where I had never written anything of my own. I dipped the pen in the ink bottle I had kept beside the ledger for 5 years. And I wrote in my grandmother's style the first entry of a new accounting: Claire Evelyn St. James. Date: October 17th. Event: public humiliation at the Northeast Insurance Awards banquet. Amount owed: not yet determined. Interest accruing daily. I closed the ledger. I put the pen back in the drawer, and I went to bed because the next morning I had to go back to the office, and I had to look Derek Holloway in the eye, and I had to smile, and I had to wait. In the lounge of the Marriott downtown, my mother raised a glass of champagne to the senior vice president. My sister laughed at something Derek Holloway said, and my father stared at the television above the bar, watching a game he did not care about. They were celebrating the success of the evening. They had no idea they had just signed the first page of their own indictment. The first piece of hard evidence arrived on a Tuesday. Patricia O'Connell called me at 7:30 in the morning before I had left for the office. I was standing in my kitchen, a mug of coffee in my hand, the ledger open on the counter beside me. I had been reviewing my grandmother's entries again, looking for the pattern I knew was there, the one I had not quite been able to name. "Claire," Patricia said, her voice clipped, professional, the voice of a woman who had found something. "I need you to come to my office today. There are documents you need to see in person." "What kind of documents?" "The kind I do not trust to email, the kind that need to be held in your hands." I did not ask more questions. I called Marcus and told him I would be late. I drove to Patricia's brownstone through morning traffic that did not register, my mind already running through the possibilities. The trust, the shell company, the payments. I had known there was more. I had felt it in the way my mother's voice had shifted when she spoke about the house, in the way my father avoided eye contact when the topic of the estate came up, in the way my sister never seemed to run out of money despite working a part-time job at a boutique that paid minimum wage. Patricia met me at the door with a manila folder in her hand. She did not offer me coffee. She led me to her office, closed the door, and spread the contents of the folder across her desk in a fan of paper. "What you are looking at," she said, "are the bank statements for the St. James Family Trust for the past 18 months. I obtained them through a formal request to the trust administrator, citing my capacity as your forensic accounting representative. The administrator was cooperative, which tells me they do not yet know what I am looking for." I picked up the first statement. The letterhead was from a regional bank I recognized, the same bank where my grandmother had kept her checking account. The statement was dated 11 months earlier. The opening balance was listed as $173,422.67. The closing balance was $158,912.14. The difference, $14,510.53, was accounted for by 3 withdrawals, each listed as authorized distribution to beneficiary. I looked at the signatures. There were 2 signatures on each withdrawal authorization. The first was my mother's, written in a sloping cursive I had seen 1,000 times. The second was mine, except I had never signed any of them. "This is a forgery," I said. My voice was calm. My hands were steady. I set the statement down and picked up the next one. 14 distinct withdrawal authorizations over the past 18 months, Patricia said, all with your purported signature. All recorded as distributions to your mother, your sister, or third-party payees. The total amount withdrawn is $63,412.10. I read through each statement. The withdrawals were not all large. Some were small, like the one for $312.47, paid to a utility company. Others were substantial, like the one for $8,000, paid to my sister's personal bank account. And then there was the one I had already seen, $6,000 paid to Holloway Consulting Services. But there was something else, a pattern I had not noticed before. The small withdrawals, the ones under $500, were all for utilities, insurance premiums, property taxes. They were expenses associated with the Victorian house on Maple Street, the house my grandmother had left to my mother. The larger withdrawals were personal. And all of them, every single one, carried my forged signature. Patricia handed me a second document. "This is the trust agreement. I obtained a certified copy from the probate court. Read the section on distributions." I read. The language was dense but clear. The trust was structured to require unanimous written consent from all named beneficiaries for any distribution exceeding a threshold of $500. The beneficiaries were listed as Eleanor Vance, Harold St. James, Melanie St. James Carson, Claire Evelyn St. James, and 2 minor grandchildren, Ethan and Olivia Carson. The minor beneficiaries were represented by their legal guardian, Melanie. "My mother forged my signature 14 times, I said, "and Melanie signed for the children without actually obtaining their consent, which a court would consider a conflict of interest." "Yes, and I have a specialist I want you to speak with. Dr. Julian Foster. He is a forensic document examiner who works with the federal courts. I want him to look at the signatures and provide a sworn affidavit that they are forgeries." "How long will that take?" "He can have a preliminary report in 48 hours, a full sworn affidavit in 5 business days." I nodded. I picked up the bank statements again and looked at the dates. The first forgery had occurred 9 months before the awards ceremony. The most recent had occurred 3 weeks after. There was more. Patricia reached into her bag and pulled out a third document. This one was a loan application, filed with a different bank, for a home equity line of credit on the Victorian house. The application was signed by my mother and my father. The amount requested was $47,000. The stated purpose was home renovations. The application had been approved. The house is not owned free and clear, Patricia said. Your grandmother had a remaining mortgage of approximately $32,000 at the time of her death. That mortgage was transferred to your mother as part of the estate. Based on the property tax records, your mother took out this HELOC approximately 8 months after your grandmother's death. The current balance on the HELOC is $39,218.07. She took out a loan against the house, against an asset that the trust technically has a claim on. Your grandmother's will transfer the house to your mother, but the trust was funded with a portion of the liquid assets and a reversionary interest in the property. I am still untangling the language, but there is a strong argument that your mother violated the terms of the trust by encumbering the property without informing the other beneficiaries. I set the documents down. I looked out the window at the street below, the cars passing, the people walking, the ordinary world that had no idea what was happening inside this room. She is using my name to steal from a trust I did not know I was a beneficiary of, I said. And she is using the house to borrow money she cannot repay. Correct. And your sister's shell company, the one that paid Derek Holloway, was used to launder at least $12,000 in additional payments that I have traced to your mother's personal credit card accounts. I believe your sister is running the money through the shell company to conceal your mother's spending from your father. He may be complicit, or he may be willfully blind. I cannot determine which from the paper trail alone. I thought about my father, sitting at the dinner table, cutting his green beans into uniform pieces. I thought about his silence, his neutrality, his refusal to engage. I had always assumed he was a victim of my mother's control. But willful blindness was not innocence. It was complicity by omission. I need a complete accounting, I said. Every dollar that has moved through the trust, the shell company, the HELOC, and the personal accounts of every family member for the past 24 months. I need it in a format that can be submitted to the probate court and the insurance board. I will have it for you within 10 days. And I need you to prepare a draft complaint to the State Attorney General's office regarding the forged signatures and the unauthorized use of my identity. Patricia nodded. That will take a week. But I want you to understand what you're doing, Claire. Once that complaint is filed, there is no going back. Your mother and sister will be investigated. If the evidence holds, criminal charges are possible. This will not stay private. This will be a matter of public record. I understand. Do you want to know what I think you should do? Yes. I think you should wait. I think you should let them continue. Let them take out more money. Let them forge more signatures. The deeper they dig, the harder they fall. You have the documentation trail. You have the timeline. You have the evidence. But if you file now, they might claim it was a mistake, an oversight, a misunderstanding. If you wait, you will have a pattern, and patterns are irrefutable. I looked at my grandmother's brooch, the replica I had pinned to my collar. I thought about the missing diamond, the thing my mother had not noticed, the thing I had never mentioned. I thought about the fountain pen in my drawer, the one I had not used, the one I was waiting for the right words to write. I will wait, I said. The next 3 weeks were a master class in emotional restraint. The morning after the awards ceremony, I walked into the office at 8:15, a paper cup of coffee in my hand, the plaque still in its box in my bag. Derek Holloway was standing by the water cooler talking to a group of junior auditors. He saw me, smiled, and raised his cup in a mock toast. Good morning, Claire. I hope you are not still holding a grudge about last night. It was a joke. Everyone knew it was a joke. It was very funny, I said. I did not smile. I walked past him to my cubicle and sat down. My phone rang at 9:47. I did not answer. The voicemail was from my mother. Claire, I need you to call me. There is an issue with the insurance on the house. They are saying the policy lapsed. I need you to handle it. Call me back. I did not call back. I sent an email to the insurance company requesting a full policy history for the property on Maple Street. I copied Marcus. I saved the request to the file. My phone rang again at 11:32. This time it was my sister. Claire, I need your help with the kids' school forms. There's a financial aid application that needs to be notarized. Can you come by this afternoon? For the kids, Claire, you know how important this is. I did not respond. I opened the shell company records Patricia had sent me. I cross-referenced the dates of my sister's withdrawals with the dates she had asked me for money. The pattern was the same. She asked for help, I gave it, and she used the money I had given her to pay bills while she siphoned the trust funds into her personal accounts. By the end of the first week, I had received 8 calls, 12 texts, and 4 emails from my mother and sister. Each one demanded something. Each one framed the request as urgent, necessary, and my obligation. I responded to exactly 0 of them. The silence was the hardest part. Not because I wanted to help them, but because I had spent 38 years being the one who answered. The one who showed up. The one who fixed things. Breaking that habit felt like breaking a bone, but I did it. I held the line. On the second Friday, my mother showed up at my office. I was at my desk, reviewing a claim file, when I looked up and saw her standing in the entrance to my cubicle. She was wearing a trench coat and holding a leather handbag, and her expression was the one she used when she was performing disappointment for an audience. "You are not answering my calls," she said. "Hello, mother. Do not hello me. I have been trying to reach you for 2 weeks. The insurance on the house is in danger of cancellation. The trust paperwork is a mess. And your sister is stressed to the breaking point because she cannot get the children's school forms notarized. I need you to handle these things. I am not your assistant, mother. You are my daughter, and when I need help, I expect my daughter to help me. Merely that is what family does." I closed the claim file. I set my hands flat on the desk. I looked at her the way I looked at a fraudulent claim, searching for the irregularity in the pattern. "Walk me through the sequence of events that led to the insurance lapse," I said. "What? You asked me to handle the insurance. So tell me what happened. When was the last payment made? Who made it? From which account?" She hesitated. That hesitation was a tell. I had seen it in Derek Holloway's left hand, in my father's green beans, in every person who had ever tried to manipulate me into doing their work for them. "The payment was due on the 1st, she said. "I thought the automatic payment was set up, but it did not go through." "Whose account was the automatic payment linked to?" "Yours. I used your information from when you helped me set up the online banking 2 years ago. You used my bank account to pay your insurance without telling me. Merely, it was easier. You are the organized one, you handle these things, I did not think you would mind." I did not scream, I did not cry. I set my coffee cup down on the coaster Marcus had bought me, and I noticed the slight, almost imperceptible tremor in my mother's left hand as she adjusted her handbag. She was nervous. She knew she had overstepped, but she was not going to admit it. "I will review the account and let you know what I find," I said. "Good. And Claire, I expect you to be at Thanksgiving. Your father is not well, he would like to see you." She left without waiting for my answer. I watched her walk through the cubicles past the water cooler toward the elevator. She did not look back. That night I opened the evidence file and added a new entry, date, November 2nd. Event, mother used my bank account without authorization to pay her insurance premium. Amount, $847.63. Documentation, bank statement attached. Notes, this is identity misuse. This is a pattern. If you have ever been the one who holds everything together while everyone else pretends you are invisible, I want you to hear this. The visibility you crave will not come from being louder. It will come from the moment you stop holding. The moment you step aside. The moment the entire structure you have been carrying alone finally collapses under its own weight, and everyone who took you for granted is standing in the rubble, wondering why it fell. I did not know if I had the courage to step aside completely, but I knew I had the patience to wait for the right moment. The final piece of evidence came together on a Thursday night, 10 days before Thanksgiving. I was in my apartment, the documents spread across my kitchen table, the ledger open beside me. Marcus had arrived at 7, carrying a bag of takeout and a laptop. He had been working on the digital organization of the evidence, cross-referencing the bank statements, the trust documents, the shell company records, and the insurance policy histories. He was not just an assistant. He had never been just an assistant. Marcus Webb held a master's degree in forensic accounting from the University of Connecticut. He had spent 6 years working for the Department of Justice, Financial Crimes Division, where he had built cases against 3 different healthcare fraud operations and 1 money laundering ring. He had left because he was tired of the bureaucracy, because he wanted to work with individual clients whose stories he could actually see. And he had come to me because he had read an article I had written for an industry journal, a dry piece about statistical anomalies in claims patterns, and he had recognized a kindred spirit. "I have finished the cross-reference," Marcus said, pulling up a spreadsheet on his laptop. "The shell company your sister registered, Carson Family Holdings, has received a total of $48,722.31 over the past 14 months. Of that amount, approximately $32,000 can be traced directly to the trust. The remaining $16,000 appears to be from your mother's personal accounts and credit cards. Where did the money go? Approximately $24,000 went to your sister's personal accounts. $12,000 went to creditors for your mother's outstanding debts. $6,000 went to Derek Holloway, and the remaining $6,722.31 is unaccounted for, possibly cash withdrawals, possibly transfers I have not yet traced. I looked at the numbers. The pattern was worse than I had thought. My mother was not just stealing from the trust. She was funneling money through my sister's shell company to hide the source. And Derek Holloway was taking payments for services that were almost certainly related to his position at the insurance company. Did you find a connection between Derek Holloway and my mother? I asked. I found an email chain. Your mother sent Derek a message 6 weeks before the awards ceremony. The subject line was regarding the award. She asked him if he could ensure that Claire receives proper recognition at the ceremony. He replied, and I quote, "I will make sure she gets exactly what she deserves." My stomach tightened. I read the email on Marcus's screen. The phrasing was ambiguous. It could have been a request for genuine recognition. It could have been a signal. The words "exactly what she deserves" could mean anything. "Print that," I said. "File it with the rest." Marcus nodded. He typed a few commands, and the printer on my desk hummed to life. "There is something else," he said. I ran a background check on Derek Holloway. He has 2 previous complaints filed against him with the insurance board. Both were dismissed, but the complaints are a matter of public record. In both cases, the complainants were women who worked under him and reported retaliation after filing internal grievances. I took the printed email from the printer. I held it in my hands. The paper was warm. How did you know to look for that? Because men who make jokes at women's expense in public are rarely men who treat women fairly in private. It is a pattern. I set the email on the pile. I looked at the evidence spread across my kitchen table. 14 forged signatures, a shell company, a pattern of identity misuse, a paid-off supervisor, a house mortgaged to the hilt. It was not a simple case of a family taking advantage of a generous daughter. It was a coordinated operation, sustained over months, involving multiple actors, legal violations, and financial crimes. And it had been happening right under my nose for 2 years. I want to file the complaint with the state attorney general the day after Thanksgiving, I said. Marcus looked at me. That is 1 week from tomorrow. I know. Are you ready? I looked at my grandmother's fountain pen sitting on my desk. I looked at the ledger, the one she had written in every night for 40 years. I looked at the brooch on my collar, the one that reminded me of the missing diamond, the thing that had been taken from me that my mother had not even noticed. I have been ready for 18 months, I said. I was just waiting for the evidence to catch up with my instinct. Marcus packed up his laptop. He paused at the door. Claire, he said, when you file that complaint, they will know it was you. I know. Your mother will not forgive you. She has not forgiven me for being born. I stopped waiting for her forgiveness a long time ago. He nodded. He left. I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by paper, surrounded by proof. I opened the ledger to the last page. I dipped my grandmother's fountain pen in the ink bottle. And I wrote, Claire Evelyn St. James, date, November 20th. Event, evidence compiled. Case ready. Countdown to Thanksgiving, 6 days. I closed the ledger. The invitations for the family Thanksgiving dinner arrived the next morning, and my mother had already printed the seating chart, placing me at the children's table, exactly where she believed I had always belonged. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and clear, the sky above Connecticut a pale blue that promised frost on the grass and ice on the windshields. I woke at 5:30, earlier than I had intended, and lay in bed for a long moment, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the day settle across my chest like a stone. I had rehearsed this moment 100 times in my head. I had organized the evidence in 3 separate folders, each one labeled, each one time-stamped, each one ready to be placed into the hands of the people who needed to see it. But rehearsal and reality are not the same thing, and I had learned, over 38 years, that the gap between them is where the unpredictable lives. I dressed in the navy blazer and white button-down I had worn to the awards ceremony. I did not wear the replica brooch. I wore my grandmother's fountain pen, clipped to the inside pocket of my jacket, the gold nib catching the light as I moved. The pen was not a weapon, it was a promise. A promise I had made to myself in the quiet hours of the night, when the evidence was spread across my kitchen table and the weight of what I was about to do felt like a physical presence in the room. Marcus picked me up at 7. He was driving his own car, a sedan he kept meticulously clean, and he had a thermal cup of coffee waiting for me in the passenger seat. "You look ready," he said. "I look like a woman who has not slept in 3 days. You look ready." I took the coffee. I did not drink it. I held it in my hands and watched the houses pass as we drove toward the Victorian on Maple Street, the house where my grandmother had raised my mother, where my mother had raised me, where the family had gathered for every holiday for as long as I could remember. The house that was now mortgaged to the hilt, the house that was being bled dry by the very people who claimed to love it. We arrived at 7:45. The driveway was already full. My mother's sedan, my sister's SUV, my father's pickup truck, and a car I did not recognize, a black sedan with government plates. I felt my stomach tight. I had not invited anyone from the state attorney general's office, but someone else had. Marcus parked on the street. I got out, the folders in my hands, and walked up the front path. The porch steps creaked under my weight, the same creak I had heard since I was a child. I opened the front door without knocking. The house smelled like turkey and cinnamon and wood smoke. The dining room table was already set with the good china, the crystal glasses, the silver my grandmother had polished every Christmas Eve. My mother was in the kitchen, basting the bird. My sister was arranging a cheese platter in the living room, her children running circles around the coffee table. My father was in his armchair, reading the newspaper, the same newspaper he had been reading for 40 years. And standing in the foyer, holding a manila envelope, was Patricia O'Connell. "Claire," she said, her voice calm, professional, "I assume you received my message." "I did not receive any message." "Then allow me to explain. After our last meeting, I took the liberty of filing a preliminary notice with the probate court regarding the trust. The court appointed a temporary administrator to review the accounts. The administrator requested a meeting with the beneficiaries today here at 11 o'clock. I looked at her. I looked at the envelope in her hand. I looked at my mother, who had emerged from the kitchen, a wooden spoon in her hand, her face reddening with the effort of maintaining composure. "What is this, Claire?" My mother's voice was sharp, accusatory. "Who is this woman? What is she doing in my house?" "Her name is Patricia O'Connell," I said. "She is a forensic accountant. She has been reviewing the trust documents." "The trust documents? What trust documents?" "There is nothing to review. The trust is closed. Your grandmother's estate was settled years ago." "That is not accurate, Mother. The trust is still active, and it has been depleted by over $63,000 in unauthorized withdrawals, all of which were signed with my forged signature." The silence that followed was the silence of a room where the air has been sucked out. My sister stopped arranging the cheese platter. My father lowered his newspaper. The children stopped running and looked at the adults with the wide, uncomprehending eyes of children who sense a storm but do not yet know its shape. "That is a lie," my mother said. "I have never forged your signature. I am your mother. I would never. I have 14 bank statements that say otherwise. I have a sworn affidavit from a certified forensic document examiner. I have a complete record of every withdrawal, every payment, every transaction that moved money out of the trust and into your accounts, my sister's accounts, and the accounts of my supervisor, Derek Holloway." My mother's face went from red to white. She set the wooden spoon down on the counter and crossed her arms, the same gesture she had used 1,000 times to close a conversation she did not want to have. "Merely, you have no idea what you are talking about. You have always been dramatic, Claire. Always looking for a reason to play the victim. I am not playing anything. I have the evidence. And I have filed a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office regarding the forgery, the identity theft, and the misuse of the trust." The word identity theft landed like a slap. My sister set down the cheese knife. My father stood up from his armchair. "Claire," my father said, his voice low, unfamiliar, "what are you doing?" "I am protecting myself. I am protecting the trust my grandmother left for me. I am protecting the assets that you and Mother and Melanie have been stealing for the past 2 years." "We were not stealing," my sister said, her voice high, defensive. "We were borrowing. For the kids, Claire. Everything we did was for the kids. You borrowed $24,000 from a trust I did not know existed, and you funneled it through a shell company you registered in your own name. That is not borrowing, that is embezzlement." My sister's mouth opened and closed. My mother stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "You cannot do this. You cannot walk into my house on Thanksgiving and destroy this family. We are your family, Claire. We are the only family you have. You should have thought of that before you forged my name 14 times. Patricia stepped forward. She opened the manila envelope and pulled out a sheaf of papers, neatly stapled, arranged in chronological order. Mrs. Vance, she said, I have here a copy of the complaint that has been filed with the State Attorney General. I also have a copy of a separate complaint filed with the National Association of Insurance Auditors regarding the payments made to Derek Holloway from the trust. I would recommend that you retain legal counsel before speaking further. I do not need a lawyer. This is a family matter. This is a legal matter, and it is no longer private. The probate court has appointed a temporary administrator. The trust accounts have been frozen. And the insurance board has opened an investigation into Derek Holloway's conduct. My mother looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but not with tears, with rage. You did this. You brought an outsider into our home. You went behind our backs. You dug through our private records. For what? For money. You have always been greedy, Claire. That is your problem. You never learned to share. I did not scream. I did not cry. I set my grandmother's fountain pen on the dining room table, the gold nib gleaming under the chandelier. This pen belonged to your mother, I said. She gave it to me after she died. It is worth $1,275. That is less than the amount of one of the withdrawals you made using my name. That is less than the monthly payment on the home equity line of credit you took out against the house she left you. That is less than the debt you are burying yourself in while pretending to be a woman of means. My mother stared at the pen. She did not speak. You stole a diamond from the brooch she left you. You did not even notice. You stole my signature and my identity. You stole the future my grandmother tried to give me, and you have spent the last 3 years telling me that I am the one who is difficult, ungrateful, dramatic. I picked up the pen. I clipped it back into my pocket. I am not here to destroy you. I am here to stop protecting you. You have built your entire life on the assumption that I would always be there to catch you, and I have been. For 38 years, I have been the one who shows up, who pays the bills, who fixes the messes, who says yes when I want to say no. That ends today. My father took a step forward. Claire, please, let us talk about this. Let us sit down and work this out. I have been working it out for 2 years. I have the documentation, I have the timeline, I have the evidence. There is nothing left to discuss. There must be something we can do, some way to make this right. I looked at him. I saw the silence he had maintained for 34 years. I saw the willful blindness, the neutrality that was never neutral, the refusal to stand up to the woman who had stolen from his own daughter. You knew, I said, didn't you? He did not answer. He did not need to, the pause was enough. You knew she was taking money from the trust. You knew she was using my name, and you said nothing. Claire, did you sign any of the documents? No, but Then you are not guilty of forgery. But you are guilty of standing by while it happened, and that is its own crime. He looked at the floor. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. He simply stood there, a man who had spent his life avoiding confrontation, finally confronted by the consequences of his own silence. The front door opened. The sound of footsteps on the porch. A woman in a dark suit entered, holding a badge and a clipboard. Eleanor Vance, she said. My mother's face crumpled. Yes. I'm Agent Maria Torres from the State Attorney General's office. I'm here to serve you with a subpoena for all records related to the St. James Family Trust. I also have a warrant to seize the financial documents located in this residence. My mother's hands began to shake. This is a mistake. This is my daughter's doing. She is lying. She is trying to destroy me. Ma'am, I need you to step away from the desk. My sister began to cry. My father sat down in his armchair, his head in his hands. The children were taken upstairs by the babysitter, who had emerged from the kitchen with a look of stunned confusion. I stood at the edge of the room, Patricia beside me, Marcus at the door. I watched as Agent Torres and 2 officers began to collect the documents, the bank statements, the loan applications, the records that would be used to build a case against my mother and my sister. My mother turned to me, her eyes wild. You are destroying this family, Claire. You are destroying everything your grandmother built. No, mother, I am saving the part of it that matters, the part that is not built on lies and theft and silence. This is not over. You will regret this, you will see. When you are alone with no family, no one to turn to, you will regret this. I looked at her. I looked at the missing diamond on her brooch. I looked at the panicked tears on my sister's face. I looked at my father who could not lift his head. Perhaps I will. But at least I will know who I am, and I will not have to carry the weight of your secrets any longer. I walked out of the house. The cold air hit my face like a blessing. Marcus was beside me, Patricia behind us. I got into the car and closed the door, and I did not look back at the Victorian on Maple Street. The call came 3 days later. I was in my apartment, the ledger open on the table, my grandmother's fountain pen in my hand. The phone rang at 8:17 in the evening. The caller ID showed my sister's name. I answered. Claire. Her voice was raw, exhausted. They have frozen all of our accounts. The bank is calling in the HELOC. They are going to take the house. Mother has had a panic attack and is in the hospital. The attorney says we might face criminal charges. I know. I never thought you would do this. I never thought you would actually go through with it. I know. Is this what you wanted, to see us destroyed? I wanted you to stop stealing from me. I wanted you to stop using me. I wanted you to see me, even once, as something other than a resource to be exploited. Silence. Then quietly, I am sorry. Sorry does not restore the forgeries. Sorry does not repay the money. Sorry does not undo the years of being treated like I was invisible. I know, but I am sorry anyway. I closed my eyes. I thought about the children, my niece and nephew, who would grow up in a house that had been stripped of its illusions. I thought about my father, who would finally have to look at the consequences of his silence. I thought about my mother, who would never admit that she had done anything wrong. The trust administrator will be in touch, I said. They will work out a repayment plan for the funds that were taken. I am not pressing charges for the forgery, but the Attorney General may choose to pursue it independently. You need a lawyer. I cannot afford a lawyer. Then find a way. That is not my problem anymore. I hung up. I set the phone down. I picked up my grandmother's fountain pen and wrote in the ledger, Claire Evelyn St. James, date December 2nd. Event, case resolved, trust frozen, family dissolved. Amount recovered, approximately $112,000. Amount regained, my life. 6 months later, I was sitting in a corner office on the 32nd floor of a glass tower in downtown Hartford. The building was new, the furniture was modern, and the view stretched across the city to the river and the hills beyond. I had been promoted to Senior Vice President of Claims Integrity at a competing insurance company, one that had recruited me after the case against Derek Holloway made the industry news. He had been terminated, investigated, and ultimately barred from holding a supervisory position in the insurance field for a period of 5 years. The payments from the trust had been ruled a conflict of interest and a violation of company policy, and he had been required to repay the full amount plus interest. My office had a mahogany desk that I had chosen myself. On the desk sat 3 objects: my grandmother's fountain pen, the copy she had given me, the silver brooch with the emerald and the 14 diamonds, which I had retrieved from my mother's jewelry box during the seizure, and which now held the original diamond I had bought to replace the missing one, and the ledger, the one my grandmother had written in for 40 years, which now contained my own entries in the same style. Marcus Webb was my deputy director. He had his own office down the hall, with a window that faced east, and he had finally received the title and the compensation that his skills had always deserved. Patricia O'Connell was a consultant for the company, brought in on retainer for complex cases. She sent me a postcard from the Cayman Islands every year on the anniversary of the Thanksgiving that changed everything. My father called me once, on a Sunday afternoon in March. He had moved out of the Victorian into a small apartment in a town 30 miles away. My mother was living with my sister, who had taken a second job and was drowning in debt from the legal fees. The house on Maple Street had been sold at auction, purchased by a young couple who planned to renovate it and raise their children there. Claire, he said, his voice older, thinner, I want to apologize, not for your mother, for myself. I should have stopped her. I should have protected you. I was a coward and I am sorry. Thank you, Dad, I appreciate that. I do not expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I know, and I am ashamed. I am not going to carry your shame for you. That is your burden now. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, I love you, Claire, I always have, I just did not know how to show it. I did not say it back. I said goodbye. I hung up. I looked at the fountain pen on my desk and I thought about the difference between love and the performance of love. My grandmother had known the difference. She had written it in her ledger, in every entry, in every careful accounting of who gave what and who owed what and who was worth what. Love was not a word. It was a choice, and my father had chosen silence for 34 years. I have 5 truths I want to leave with you. They are not soft truths. They are not the kind of truths that fit on a greeting card or a motivational poster. They are the truths I learned in the long, cold winter after I walked out of my mother's house and into my own life. The first truth is this: boundaries are not unkindness. They are the architecture of self-respect. Every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you give when you are empty, Every time you show up for people who would not show up for you, you are not being generous. You are being complicit in your own erasure. The family that treats you like an option will never see you as a priority, no matter how many times you carry them. The second truth is this: the people who benefit from your silence will never reward you for breaking it. They will call you selfish, dramatic, ungrateful. They will rewrite history to cast themselves as the victims. Let them. Their story is not your responsibility. You are not required to manage their perception of reality. The third truth is this: narcissistic family systems operate on a single rule. The person who speaks the truth is the enemy. The person who maintains the fiction is the ally. You will never win by playing by their rules, because their rules are designed for you to lose. The only winning move is to stop playing entirely. The fourth truth is this: forgiveness is not reconciliation. You can forgive someone for their limitations, their failures, their cruelty, without letting them back into your life. Forgiveness is for you. Reconciliation is earned, and some people will never earn it. That is not your failure, that is their choice. The fifth truth is this: you are not responsible for the family you were born into. You are responsible for the life you build. The people who love you will not ask you to shrink. The people who see you will not ask you to hide. The people who deserve you will not take you for granted. You do not have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. I still have the ledger. I write in it every night. I record the cases I review, the patterns I find, the people I help. I record the money I save, the fraud I stop, the justice I bring. I record the names of the people who showed up when I needed them, and the names of the people who did not. My grandmother's fountain pen still writes cleanly after all these years. I use it every day, because I finally found the words I have been waiting to write. If this story found you at a moment when you needed to hear it, share it with someone else who needs the same reminder. The quiet women, the ones who hold everything together, the ones who are never seen, the ones who are asked for everything and given nothing in return. We are everywhere. And we are learning to stop carrying what was never ours to hold. Keep your boundaries strong. Guard your peace, and I will see you in the next.